Okay, we're going to talk about the system monitoring commands now, many of which are part of a package called systat, which you can use your package manager, RPM, or the Debian package manager to install, if it's not installed already. First thing I think I forgot to talk about, I forgot to add to my little outline here a few of the basic commands like df, which will tell you how much disk space is used on all of your disk, or du. Let's go over here. Let's do a df. That basically will tell you how much disk space you've got and where your free disk space is. It gives you, says that my root directory is 81% full. My home directory is 2% full. Also, and if I want to actually go down to, say, home and look and see who's using that information in that directory, if I type du like this, this will go down and give me a listing of how much every subdirectory in that directory is using. Although it does depend on me having permissions, and apparently I don't have permissions, but if I was root when I typed this command, I would have permissions and I'd be able to see everything. The other thing about the df command that is useful is to type df with the -i option, because that will tell you, remember, you can, as well as having free space on a disk, you need to have free inodes on the disk. And this basically says that on my disk, I haven't used more than 20% of the inodes on any disk. But if this ever got up to 100%, even though I might have a lot of free space, I couldn't make a new file since I don't have an inode to put that in. So so once in a while, it's useful to use df to look at your inodes. Okay. Back here, the free command is useful. The free command, oops, let's go back here. Let's clear our screen. And let's type the free command. And this will give us a listing of our memory usage, both our swap space and our normal memory usage. I don't know if this has a continuous mode. A lot of the system monitoring commands have continuous modes on them. Let's see if this one does. Yes, there is a -s option here where we can make that command renew itself every, free, say 5 seconds. Now, I probably wouldn't make a command renew itself that often, but that gives you the idea. Okay. And it's basically, it will keep track of things on a continual basis here. So, let's get out of that. Now, suppose I have a command like df that does not have a continuous mode. There is a command called watch that is very, very useful for making a command repeat itself. The watch command, if you type man space watch, you'll see that the watch command is simply a command that makes a command repeats itself every so many seconds. So let's say watch space -n space, okay, why don't they use -s like they did for the last command? I don't know. That's Unix. We do lack some consistency, but it's a great operating system. One of its strengths and high points is not consistency, though. Let's do every 10 seconds, and then we'll do df space -h. And what you see here is this is the time and date up here. Watch that guy. It's going to get renewed in a few seconds. There we got. We get a new time and date, and then we get a new listing of everything down here. Of course, the new listing is the same as the old listing because this doesn't change very rapidly. But if you're doing something like an enormous copy command, like you're backing up a system, you might actually want to do something like this to see if you've got a disk drive that is filling up. Especially if you've got users that are doing something like crazy and hitting a disk drive really heavily, you may end up wanting to start monitoring that, and a watch command would allow you to do that. And then you can just type a Control-C to get out of that. And there's lots of options on the watch command. I'll let you study it yourself. But yeah. Okay, let's go on and look at other commands here. Most of these commands we discussed on in Lab 8. No, I'm sorry, Lab 9 on monitoring system resources. So we've already really done a lab on this chapter. Another command that is sometimes useful is just swap on with the -S option, which just tells you about your swap space. There's also commands for, they're sort of general purpose commands, but they're really heavily oriented towards your towards the CPU and monitoring the individual processes. These commands include top, mpstat, sar, vmstat, and so on. Of these, SAR is kind of the mother of these commands, I'd say. It's the one that's maybe a little bit least friendly, and probably is not the one that I would use on a day-to-day basis, if just for looking at a machine. Except there are a few operating systems that this is there are a few Unixes, not Linux, but a few other Unixes, that this is probably the only command that really comes with it, and all the others you've got to get and install special. Many of the Linuxes actually do not have SAR installed by default, and you've got to install it separately. SAR, though, you should read about. I don't use it on a day-to-day basis, but it's a really great command if you want to have something run on the machine continuously to monitor the status of the machine, and then you want to look at it, every third Sunday or something. So often I will have SAR run and keep a log file on machines that are running remotely that I want to monitor every now and then, because that will already have the statistics caught for me, and I don't need to be sitting there watching it all the time, and I can just run the reports afterwards. SAR is a little bit complex, but it's a great command for that. The command I use on a day-by-day basis is really top. So we will run top here. Top is just so ever useful. And it runs like this. It gives us a listing of all the users, all the process IDs, gives us a listing of how much CPU each guy is using, and it gives me the associated command. It also gives me a lot of statistics up here. The line I find most handy is the CPU's line, which tells me how much CPU is being used. It says I've got 85%, 85% idle CPU. This is a WA, amount of CPU used for WA, which is wait times. In a way, that tells me a little bit about the disk usage, because usually these waits are associated with accessing the disk drives, although it could be a network card or something too. So that's very useful. It tells me a little bit about my memory usage and my swap usage. The swap space, memory and swap space usage is not terribly meaningful on Linux. It's a little more meaningful on some other Unixes, because Linux has a habit of, if it sees memory available, it will find a use for it. It will always use memory if it can find a use for it. So sometimes it looks like 100% of your memory is being used. With Linux, it usually looks like 100% of your memory is being used, or basically, and if you're used to using older or other operating systems, you'll say, oh God, I got to buy more memory. But with Linux, because it wants to use the memory, just having a huge memory usage isn't a sign that you're out of memory. It's a sign that the system's using the memory well, and but it's not enough to conclude that you need to buy more memory. If the system's still performing well, then that's good. Okay. So this is the command I use most often. If I type H, it will give me help information on various options I have on this command. There's a lot of options. You should, at some point, study them. You don't need to do that right away, actually, because just the default option is good for most uses. But there are some very useful options. There's ways to sort your fields. There's ways to make different fields show up in the command. And the most important of these, I think, is the S option. This changes the default delay. The default delay between refreshing the screen is only 3 seconds. I always push that up to about 30 seconds. And I'm going to say this with every command where it has a repeat type period that you can run it in a continuous mode. A lot of them have defaults down around 3 and 5 seconds, and I personally think that's too short. That I personally prefer more like 20, 30 seconds, because at 2 or 3 seconds, there's too much variance between various iterations of the command. And, we don't care if the machine's slow as a dog for 3 seconds if it's fast the next 3 seconds. But when a machine starts slowing down 20, 30 seconds at a time, then it starts to become painful to use. So I tend to think that it's better if you have a longer period to do the average to catch the... what this does is this catches information during that period, and it does an average of the value over that period of all of these values. And I think a longer period is more suitable than these ultra short periods. You can decide for yourself, but I really think the longer period gives you better statistics and much more useful, in my own humble opinion. Okay, one thing that these commands do not do, like the top command, the top command really doesn't do much for trying to, it doesn't tell you much about your I.O. They tell you a little bit, but not enough to really be useful. A better command for that is, there is a command called IO top. That is supposed to tell you a lot about your I.O. usage. I really don't have that much experience with IO top, but it looks quite useful. It doesn't have as many options as top. And there's a command called, oh boy, I'm running out of time here. And the command is called, I'm sorry, IO stat. That's the one I commonly use. IO stat. Well, I'll come back here in a second and we will talk about IO stat. Bye-bye.